today we'll tackle the budgets of the Dangerous Drugs Board and the PDEA. So I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleague, Senator Amy Marcos. Manang Amy.
Hi, good morning.
Umaga. Morning. And Senator Bongo has already logged in. So we'll now start with the presentation of first the DDB and then the PDEA. Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we can flash, yeah, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Well, Mr. Chair, we know that the Dangerous Drugs Board was created by virtue of RA 9165. And basically, we're tasked to develop and adopt the comprehensive, integrated, unified, and balanced national drug abuse prevention and control strategy. Next slide, please. In fulfilling the mandates of the board, we have these two main functions, Mr. Chair: eradicate supply and demand, and of course, promote regional and international cooperation. Next slide. We are also supported, Mr. Chair, by the executive order issued by the President in 2018, which is to implement the Philippine anti-illegal drug strategy. Next slide. And so we want to achieve drug-free communities through supply reduction efforts involving aggressive law enforcement and prosecution with strong adherence to the rule of law and observance of human rights, coupled with comprehensive demand reduction initiatives. Next slide. So basically, Mr. Chair, yan po, alam na po natin lahat yung two-pronged strategy po natin, which is the supply and demand reduction. Next slide. Now, moving forward, Mr. Chair, with our 2021 budget, you will note that our MOE takes up the big chunk, no? More than half of our budget. And then we also have the special fund, which accounts for 22% of our allocation. And then the rest are personnel services, capital outlay, and of course, the retirement life insurance privileges. Next slide, please. So ito na, Mr. Chair, ang pinaka comparison between our 2021 and 2020 budget. And you will note there's a reduction, Mr. Chair, of 52%. No? Majority of the reductions, Mr. Chair, ito po yung mga activities na nagawa na po namin, Mr. Chair. So, okay. So itong in red, Mr. Chair, 1.4 million, ito po yung capital outlay ng MITI project, yung mga IT development project. So basically, Mr. Chair, nabili na po namin yon this year. So this year, Mr. Chair, more on training activities na po tayo and advocacy, so nawala na siya sa budget. Now, support operations, yung 58 million, total of 59,928 million, plus yung 600,000, sir, na nasa operations capital outlay. Yan po, Mr. Chair, yung sa survey natin. Again, na-conduct na po natin yung survey. We're just waiting for the final report to be furnished. So, nawala na po siya sa 2021 budget. And then, Mr. Chair, yung 18,339,000, ito po, supposedly, Mr. Chair, we were supposed to conduct 3 international conventions. Kaya lang, because of COVID, Mr. Chair, and mukhang hindi na siya magtutuloy even next year, Mr. Chair. And then, the rest, Mr. Chair, yung locally funded projects, 308 million. This pertains to congressional initiatives, Mr. Chair, 250 for community-based, support to community-based programs. And supposedly, Mr. Chair, dapat we will be conducting yung pilot drug testing, saliva testing with LTO. So nawala rin yun, Mr. Chair, total of 308. We're hoping, Mr. Chair, na yung dalawa na yun, yung 250 plus yung random drug test, saliva testing, Mr. Chair, with LTO, sana maibalik, sir, and hopefully next year, sir. So total amount, Mr. Chair, reduction 377 million was removed from the previous budget, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. So 64% of the reduction sa MOE, Mr. Chair, followed by 79%, negative 79% capital outlay. So again, total of 52% reduction, Mr. Chair. Next slide.
Excuse me, yung sa saliva test with the LTO, ready to roll out ito?
Sir, we were supposed to procure equipment yan, sir. May mga saliva testing equipment tayo, sir, together
Yeah.
with LTO, plus confirmatory machine from NRL. So 3 agencies, sir, ang mag-i-implement
So wala
dapat.
pa ring trials ito?
Wala pa, sir.
Wala pa kasi wala equipment.
No, hindi
So
na
how about yung
purchase, sir.
supplier, di ba dapat mag-conduct ng trials?
Yes, sir. Sir, meron na tayong coordination with technical agencies Australia. Supposedly, sir, tinuturuan yung staff natin na NRL.
Anyway, sige, we'll discuss it later.
Sige, sir.
Proceed.
Sir, the next slide presents yung aming fund utilization. In 2019, Mr. Chair, you will note 97.67% were utilized. So unobligated namin, sir, the time is only 2.33. Now, as of June, Mr. Chair, for our 2020 budget utilization, as of June, we have obligated and incurred yung 32.42%. So medyo malaki yung unobligated, Mr. Chair. But I was informed yesterday that by August, Mr. Chair, almost 60% obligated na tayo, sir. And I got the assurance, Mr. Chair, that makukuha namin, sir, yung previous percentage namin. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Ay, ito, okay. Yes, sir. Nakakolekta ng konti, Mr. Chair, from 2019. But in 2020, sorry, next slide, medyo nabawasan. Apparently, sir, nalulugi ang Philippine Racing and Manila Jockey Club. So wala silang remittances. But still, we were able to collect as of June 78 million, no? And I'm sure again, mahigitan namin yung 77 na pinipeg usually ng DBM. Again, Mr. Chair, we would request na sana tanggalin yung pagkapeg in the current budget, sir. Nakapeg na naman. Last time natanggal na natin yun, sir. So sana, sir, ma-remove ulit.
I understand naging 87 million na, di ba? From 77 na cap?
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, nawala yung cap. So, yung
Yeah.
collection, sir, we can request sa Treasury
Yes.
as the need arises, no? Ngayon, sir, nagkaroon ulit ng cap sa
Sa 2021.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
sige. Yep.
Ayun.
Proceed.
Thank you, sir. The rest are highlights of our accomplishments based on our targets. Next slide, please. So for policy formulation, 2019, Mr. Chair, we were able to develop 3,040 policies, issuances, resolutions, regulations. IEC materials, Mr. Chair, we were able to develop 99. Capacity building activities we conducted for 20,000 plus individuals. Next slide, please. The following slides, Mr. Chair, presents our outcome indicators. Outcome indicator number 1, number of DDB policies. As of June, Mr. Chair, 12 agencies yung nag-i-implement ng ating mga policies. Madadagdagan ito, Mr. Chair, kasi last board meeting namin, we were able to dispense 8 issues and may corresponding regulations yun, Mr. Chair. So madadagdagan siya. In 2020, so far as of June, we already have 5 board regulation. Next slide, please. We already have 5 board regulations, 14 board resolutions, and we have issued certifications and exemptions for non-controlled chemicals of around 1,466. Next slide, please. Advocacy programs, Mr. Chair, we have implemented 9 involving 1,536 individuals. We have capacity building programs conducted as of June. Again, 1,384 benefited, Mr. Chair. July, Mr. Chair, madadagdagan yan kasi we moved towards online capacity building. And so we conducted series of webinars and online activities, Mr. Chair. And I think that's it, Mr. Chair. The rest are our COA audit observations, including management actions. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Yusek Reyes. Yeah, we'll hear now from the Director General of PDEA, General Wilkins.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We're here to present the budget for PDEA, but first let me brief you on the accomplishment of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. Next. Next slide, please. We go with the organization. We have next slide. We have 13 services. Next slide, please. And 17 regional offices nationwide. Although we already have 86 provincial offices, but it's not really organized as the provincial offices. And part of that will be the request for our budget. Next slide. The Philippine drug situation. Next. Our drug of choice is shabu, ecstasy, and marijuana. 4 million estimated drug users, 117 local drug groups, 3,625 target listed personalities. Modus operandi is local manufacturing or bulk smuggling. Entry points are stale airport, seaport, coastlines, and mail-in parcels. Next slide. Drug affectation. Out of the 42,045 barangays in the country, 19,876 are already cleared barangays, with the remaining 14,491 drug-affected barangays, or 34.47% of the 42,045 barangays in the country. 232 seriously affected, 8,746 moderately affected, and 5,513 slightly affected. If you will look at the drug affectation, barangay affectation, Mr. Chair, these 5,513 slightly affected barangays are barangays who only have drug users or persons who use drugs. So the intervention that we're going to do is through arrest or a drug intervention program, such as the community-based drug rehabilitation program or the facility-based drug rehabilitation program. So this
For our re-education, kindly define seriously affected,
Yes, sir.
moderately affected, in very layman terms.
Yes, sir. Serious, we start with slightly affected, Mr. Chair. Slightly affected are barangays whose drug personality are only person who use drugs or users. So moderately affected,
Regardless of the number of users.
regardless, sir.
As
Basta
long as,
with the presence of user yung barangay,
Okay.
slightly affected
all
lang
right.
yun, sir. And then once there is the presence of a pusher, it now becomes moderately affected. One pusher. So regardless of how many drug personalities there are, pag meron ng isang pusher yung barangay, it is already moderately affected. And if the minimum requirement for seriously affected, if there is already a drug den. So halo-halo na yun, sir. May warehouse, lahat-lahat na yun, sir. That's already considered as seriously affected. So kung titignan natin, sir, itong affectation of the barangay, barangay drug clearing really is doable because we have 5,513 slightly affected. Ang kailangan lang talaga dito, Mr. Chair, is community-based drug rehabilitation program or facility-based drug rehabilitation program for the P-Woods.
Yeah, especially yung sa moderately affected. Kasi once you determine that there's at least one pusher, dapat may intelligence, may intel na kayo kung sino yung pusher.
Yes, sir.
Diba?
Meron na,
So,
sir.
ang pinakamadaling
Users,
ma-address dito, yung moderately affected barangays, actually.
kasi sir,
not
yung
necessarily.
moderately affected, meron pa ring user dun, sir.
Yeah, I know, but at least yung pusher yung matatarget ninyo,
Yes, sir.
it will greatly reduce the number of users.
Yes, sir. Yes,
diba?
sir.
Sige.
Yes, sir. So, by identifying the moderately and slightly affected, the barangay drug clearing will really move on. Ito yung inaano natin, sir. Until such time na ang matitira na lang dito, sir, is yung seriously affected, dito na talaga yung laban ng kontra. Ito na yung mga high profile na laban natin, sir. Let us take note that on December of 2017, a total of 24,424 barangays are affected noong 2017, sir. Or 58% of the total barangays in the country are affected. Transnational drug syndicates, we have 4. The Chinese-Filipino drug syndicate, which composed of 60% of arrested foreign national in the country. African drug syndicate, ito yung tawag natin dati na WADS, West African, but African na ngayon. And recently, the Mexican Sinaloa drug cartel, but we don't have any activity since 2017. But right now, the big emerging problem is the drug syndicate operating in Golden Triangle, which is the Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand, and Laos. Smuggling of illegal drugs, there are 16 incidents of interceptions of parcel containing illegal drugs from January to August of this year, composed of almost a kilo of shabu and others, as shown. From 2018 to 2019, there are 42 incidents recorded for ship-side smuggling, and a total of 432 kilos of cocaine worth 2.23 billion were recovered. Sir, aside from the usual smuggling route, we believe that meron ding kinalaman yung ship-side smuggling cell sa bulk smuggling na dumadating, sir, sa atin. And this is what we are working on right now. Next chart. Local manufacturing of illegal drugs. We have dismantled a kitchen-type laboratory in June 2020 in Binyan, Laguna, and rescue of one minor. Dismantling of a clandestine kitchen-type clandestine laboratory in Subic, Zambales. Next. Continuous use of tea bags. Until 2 weeks ago, talagang meron pa rin talaga mga tea bags, sir, na talagang lumalabas. And this is how they cover the smuggling of dangerous drugs. Drug control strategy. Parati natin sinasabi, sir, where kahit saan man ang droga manggaling, sigurado, sir, pag ang barangay natin is not cleared, siguradong sa barangay, sir, ito lalanding. Next slide. That is why I have been advocating for more than 17 years the Barangay Drug Clearing Program. And it's right now fully implemented during my term. And this is what we have asked the Dangerous Drugs Board, which we included in the Philippine Anti-Drug Strategy, the Barangay Drug Clearing Program. From the establishment and strengthening of Anti-Drug Abuse Council up to the maintaining of community as drug-free, which will, by working all of it, this will ensure the community to be insulated from use and abuse of dangerous drugs. Ang vital dito, Mr. Chair, is itong intervention program of drug personalities, monitoring of respondents, and sustainability. At hanggang dito, sir, sa establishment ng Community Drug Watch. Kasi by that time, we are transferring the initiative to the different barangay once they already watch their own barangay from the entrance of dangerous drugs. And of course, the continuous preventive education program as main part of the barangay drug clearing program. Next, please. So the intervention, kung titingnan po natin, the intervention of drug users through barangay drug clearing program, barangay community-based drug rehabilitation program, 173,000, do sa treatment and rehabilitation, 1,500. We have such thing as the Balay Sirangan Reformatory Program. This program is a reformation program for drug pushers, Mr. Chair. Those who are non-HBT drug pushers are reformed in a in-house 3 months drug reformation center so that when they go out, they can be brought back to the mainstream of the barangay. While on the other hand, the Philippine National Police have their own recovery and wellness program. Right now, it's already it's already accepted by the DOH as part of the wellness and recovery and wellness program. A total of 558,000 drug users were provided with intervention by the Philippine National Police. So from since 2016 until today, there are 736,000 drug intervention program conducted for the person who use drugs. At Mr. Chair, hindi pa ito kompleto dahil kinukolekta pa namin ang data coming from the DOH, Mr. Chair. Next. So if we PDEA has as part of the Philippine anti-drug strategy, we are working on a three-pronged approach. Dati sir, basic natin na supply reduction and demand reduction. Ang pinaka-importante dito sir sa barangay drug clearing program is yung harm reduction, which is hindi ito napansin ng previous administration dahil wala talagang rehabilitation program for the PWOODs. Kaya ganun kataas ang drug affectation, particularly sa barangays, at ganun karami ang drug users ng Pilipinas. But right now, bumababa, particularly on yung actual survey ng Dangerous Drugs Board, medyo bumababa talaga sir ang drug affectation, particularly for drug users. And this is because of the harm reduction program. Ito sir, ang program na tinututukan ng PDEA at Dangerous Drugs Board sa lahat ng local government unit, because it's the local government units are in charge of the harm reduction program, particularly in the community-based drug rehabilitation program. So dito tayo sir nakatutok ngayon. At ito sir ang minomonitor ng PDEA at Dangerous Drugs Board. In order to have a good platform for the barangay drug clearing program, PDEA has launched Barangay PDEA.
Kindly expound on the harm reduction program. What specific activities?
Harm reduction program, Mr. Chair, for drug users, meron tayong community-based drug rehabilitation program. Ito yung outpatient, tapos 1 month for low risk na affected personality, 1 month yun sir na community-based drug rehabilitation. For moderately affected, 4 months of rehabilitation, outpatient. And then for severely affected, dun siya papasok sir sa facility-based. That's for the PWOODs, for the drug addicts. But dito sir sa drug pusher, meron din tayong balay silangan on most areas in the Philippines na nakapag-establish. These are for drug pushers na gustong bumalik na sir sa mainstream. Ito na yung mga drug pusher na gustong sumurrender na meron na silang option to surrender. Kasi sir, dati wala sila eh. Walang rehabilitation ng drug pusher before. So ngayon, they have the option. They surrender and then they undergo the Balay Silangan Reformation Program. That is 3 months in-house recovery program for drug pushers, Mr. Chair. So ito sir yung harm reduction. And dahil dito, hindi I have been we have been in drug law enforcement, Mr. Chair. At yung huli kulong, it doesn't make any better. Kasi yung mga nahuhuli natin at kinukulong, after a while, papalitan lang din sir eh. So kailangan talaga sir, yung mga naandyan, dapat magbago, particularly doon sa demand side, doon sa mga gumamit na. So talagang ito sir yung talagang minomonitor natin, ito talaga tayo nagbubuhos ngayon ng oras, so that, ang context nito, Mr. Chair, is pag wala nang gagamit, kahit magpasok pa sila na magpasok ng droga, talaga wala nang bibili, Mr.
Anong
Chair.
percentage ng relapse?
Of
More or less,
course,
estimate lang.
dun sa facility-based, Mr. Chair, more than 50%.
More than 50%
Yes,
ang
sir.
relapse
But
cases.
this time kasi sir, Mr. Chair, minomonitor natin. Yung right after kasi sa rehabilitation, may monitoring pa rin tayo, Mr. Chair. Particularly do sa barangay, kasi kiniklear natin yung barangay eh. So, once na community-based drug rehabilitation program sila, minomonitor ng ating resident agent dun sa lugar kung sino-sino pa yung mga gumagamit. Until na ma-declare na sila na drug cleared, and then, meron tayong tinatanim na dun sir, na Barangay Intelligence Network, na dun tayo kumukuha na rin sir ng information. So malalaman natin kung sino yung bumalik, immediately, nabibigyan natin ng intervention agad sir yung mga bumabalik. And that's the beauty of the Barangay Drug Clearing Program, Mr. Chair. This is not the traditional yung huli kulong and then pinaparada natin at pagkatapos, naandyan na naman sir. So, in order to have a good platform for the Barangay Drug Clearing Program, PDEA has launched Barangay PDEA FB page. Dahil ang target natin dito, Mr. Chair, is millennial at ito na talaga sir yung new normal ngayon na para makapalaganap, Mr. Chair, ang information. So we launched the Barangay PDEA. This Barangay PDEA is the platform that can communicate yung mga successes ng mga taong nagbago, nag-harm intervention, nagbago, nagkaroon ng bagong buhay, at naging kapaki-pakinabang sa barangay, Mr. Chair. And it encourages more support from the public and other stakeholders. So malakas ngayon sir ang bandera ng Barangay PDEA right now because we have been monitoring its activities. Drug supply reduction from January to July of 2020, we have a total of 18,000 anti-drug operation, 26,000 drug personalities were arrested. And this is the supply reduction accomplishment. Next chart. So kung makikita natin, Mr. Chair, from January to July, 1.5 tons na po ang nakukuha ng drug law enforcement, while 2019, 2 tons. So dadami pa ito, Mr. Chair. Next chart. One dismantled laboratory, 89 drug dens were dismantled for the period. Marijuana eradication, medyo tumaas, Mr. Chair. And high volume seizures, tumaas na rin, Mr. Chair. Next. High value targets, a total of 1,121 high value targets were arrested by drug law enforcers. Next chart, please. So, nung June 3 of this year, PDEA has arrested Mr. Samson Tan. Itong si Mr. Samson Tan, Mr. Chair, galing ito sa Bilibid. Ito, sir, yung nahuli natin na naglilinis ng shabu nung nasa Bilibid pa, sir. and then nakalabas.
Ito yung GCTA, di ba? I think from Palawan.
Yes, sir. Nakuha natin, sir, on while
So, how did you arrest him? By virtue of the presidential directive to rearrest all
hindi, sir.
those granted
Anti-drug
GCTAs?
operation, Mr. Chair.
Operation?
Yes, sir. Ngayon, nakakulong na naman,
Because I
sir.
recall the president issued a directive to rearrest all those who were granted GCTA, especially mga drug personalities.
Meron siyang kitchen-type laboratory, Mr. Chair. And prior to that, meron tayong nakakuha tayo ng almost 2 kilos of shabu prior to his arrest.
Question,
Yes.
did it not interest you to pursue your investigation to find out how he was granted GCTA? That's important kasi you can more or less establish the connection from within a prison facility because I recall sa Palawan ito eh. Ito yung I think it was the not the NBP director himself but the
Doon sa ano, sir? sa
correctional superintendent who issued the GCTA. So anyway, kindly pursue.
Ipurso, sir.
Kasi kung nandun pa rin yung connection niya, nandun pa rin yung connection niya, di ba? So dapat
Yes.
ma-uproot yun.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Kasi sir, pag ito sir, pag inaano mo na sir, wala eh. Talagang hindi na nga marunong mag-English eh. Hindi marunong mag-Tagalog, Mr. Chair eh. Pag nahuli mo na eh. Pero habang tinatransact mo, Mr. Chair, Tagalog eh. This was the seizure in Marilao, Bulacan, together with the Philippine National Police. 828 kilos were seized with the arrest of 3 personalities, including Chinese national. On the following, on the succeeding days, seizure of 35 kilos of shabu with the arrest of 2 personalities, including Chinese national. Following operation was conducted in Imus, Cavite with the arrest of a drug personality with the 371 kilos of shabu. So lahat ito, Mr. Chair, ay na-destroy last month. We have destroyed we conducted the biggest destruction in the history of the Philippines last month, Mr. Chair. Again, drug smuggling again in Lubao, Pampanga with the seizure of 9,471. Mr. Chair, there is a trend right now na yung high-end, wala na kasing party ngayon, Mr. Chair. So talagang bahay-bahay sila and yung anlakas ngayon ng sellable ngayon talaga, Mr. Chair, yung kush tsaka yung ecstasy. Dahil wala ng party, sa bahay-bahay na lang talaga sila, sir. And doon na lang sila nagpa-party, Mr. Chair. Again, seizure of 3,907 pieces of ecstasy in Parañaque City. A seizure of 18 kilos of marijuana, of shabu, including 2 Chinese national in Quezon City. Seizure of 113 marijuana in Clark, Pampanga with the rest of 2 personalities. Seizure of 12 kilos of shabu. Ito naman, Mr. Chair, is sa Mandawi City. Meron tayong informant na pumasok, but nakuha natin ito, Mr. Chair, to the help of the narcotics drug detection dogs natin, Mr. Chair. Talagang inupuan ito, Mr. Chair. So we have seized 12 kilos of shabu. And part of dito sa kampanya natin, Mr. Chair, is yung with the platform that I launched since September of 2020. Ito Mr. Chair, yung isumbong mo kay Wilkins. This is a FB page created to elicit yung mga reklamo sa mga barangays, reklamo buong Pilipinas, and right now we have received more than 2,195 information. At 70 dito, Mr. Chair, nagresulta ng big seizure, Mr. Chair. dito sa isumbong mo kay Wilkins. This is through text, smart text and calls, including yung messages dun sa FB page, Mr. Chair. Drug demand reduction, 551,000 audiences were reached. On harm reduction program, ito nga Mr. Chair, yung establishment of Balay Silangan, 142 reformation centers were already inaugurated. 2,159 reformists ang right now na andon, 1,542 graduates, and out of that, meron na tayong 163 employed individuals out of this harm reduction program for drug reformists or drug pushers. Performance report for 2019. We have accomplished all of the targets as shown. For 2020, Mr. Chair, medyo may problema tayo dito sa barangay drug clearing because ito nga yung main program ng barangay clearing, which is harm reduction program, medyo natigil ng local government because of the social distancing and because of the pandemic. So hindi natin maituloy ngayon yung clearing of drug-affected barangays dahil hindi naging priority right now ng local government unit. And this is what we are working together with the Dangerous Drugs Board and DOH, DILG, na talagang makapagdiretso pa rin sila ng harm reduction program down to the barangay level. But lahat ng other targets were already accomplished, Mr. Chair. Itong high impact operations, kaya namin habulin to, Mr. Chair, dahil medyo stymie pa rin because of the pandemic. Pero kaya nating habulin ito, sir, Mr. Chair, hanggang sa December. COA findings. Dito sa COA findings natin, Mr. Chair, out of the 14 million na understatement, ito kasi sir, Mr. Chair, ito yung mga hindi nabigyan na resibo yung mga end users natin. And ito Mr. Chair, umabot from 2006 hanggang 2019. So talagang binacktrack namin, sir. Right now, meron na lang tayong 1 million na lang, sir, na natitira out of the 14 billion na understatement accumulates, Mr. Chair. And from time to time, we are still reconciling the balance with the account records, Mr. Chair. Next. Right now, Mr. Chair, out of the 87 million na outstanding sa not unliquidated, 1 million na lang, Mr. Chair, or 5% na lang, Mr. Chair, ang naiiwan. At itong 5% na ito, Mr. Chair, ay nabigyan na natin ng demand letters. Ulit, yung mga accountable officers natin, Mr. Chair. Ganito rin, ito rin, Mr. Chair, yung sa without receipt, ilan na lang natitira dito? More than 1M na lang din. 1M na lang, Mr. Chair, ang natitira. And before the end of this quarter, Mr. Chair, magsi-0-0 ito, Mr. Chair. Lahat ito, Mr. Chair, talagang since lumabas yung COA report, Mr. Chair, talagang pinabacktrack ko lahat ito, Mr. Chair. And I commit that this will be mababalance na ito, sir, ng 0-0, sir. Non-moving dormants, ito naman, sir, na ano na natin. Wala tayong non-moving. We have 15 million, Mr. Chair, at ito ang ganun pa rin, sir, Mr. Chair, account. Ang tagal na nito, sir. Since 2003, 2004, Mr. Chair. Na ito yung inahanap namin ngayon, itong 15 million. Baka pwede pa ulit naming magamit itong 15 million na ito, Mr. Chair. Ito sir yung pinanggalingan pa ng halos lahat ng DG na dumaan sa PDEA. Ina-account ko ngayon itong dormant account sir ng 15 million. And we have complied with the gender development program, and we have complied with senior citizens and differently abled persons, Mr. Chair. We have complied with the property insurance law, tax laws, and the GSTIM premium were already remitted. Next. Pag-ibig fund law, pag-ibig funds were already remitted. And we have participated in annual disaster simultaneous earthquake drill, Mr. Chair. Next. Wala po kaming suspension. And disallowances, Your Honor, wala po kami. Next. For budget utilization, as of now, 97% has already been disbursed, Mr. Chair. Next. Budget ito, Mr. Chair, yung hindi inaprubahan ng DBM. Ito po yung wish list namin sana, Mr. Chair. Pero hindi na aprubahan, so dire-diretso na lang natin to, Mr. Chair, dahil meron kaming...
Anyway, we have that. Anyway, sasabit nyo naman sa
Yes, sir. Yes,
amin.
yes, Mr. Chair.
We have taken note of that, including yung sa DDB. Kasi mali talaga yung in-approve ng NEP, under the NEP, ano? Versus what you have suggested or proposed during the budget call. Sige. Yeah.
Dire-diretso hanggang sa NEP for 2001. Ito, sir, yung kung titingnan natin, actually, sir, ang increase lang talaga is personal services. Talagang decrease lang lahat, sir, particularly yung capital outlay. May malaking problema, sir, kami sa capital outlay. Dahil meron pa rin kasi kaming isang region, yung pinanggalingan ko, sir, Region 10. Nagre-rent pa rin, sir, kami hanggang ngayon. That is why we propose, nagka-problema yun, Mr. Chair, dahil wala kaming lupa. But nung naandun ako, sir, nakapagbigay, sir, ang El Salvador ng 1,500 square meters donated sa amin, sir. So we propose for the establishment o construction, sir, ng Region 10, a regional office. Kasama na po yan dun sa wish list, sir, namin. Ito na po yun, Mr. Chair. Next. Yan na po siya, Mr. Chair. Part of that is pakitaas. Yan. Mr. Chair, ito pong enforcement of operational capability. Ito yung mobility, sir, ng regional offices, ng provincial offices, and Mr. Chair, ngayon, sir, nag-increase kasi kami ng seaport interdiction unit dahil nga dito sa smuggling. So talagang gumawa na talaga kami ng seaport interdiction unit na instead of tag-isa-isa lang dati per region, right now may tagdadalawa na, sir, ang seaport interdiction unit natin, sir. Pero hindi talaga ito budgeted pa. So talagang pinagkasya-kasya ko na lang ang pera dahil andito, sir, yung bulk ng trabaho eh. Including naglagay na rin, dati wala kami airport interdiction unit na budget. Ang meron lang, Mr. Chair, yung international airport, but most of the domestic airports, sir, gumagana. So naglagay na rin ako ng airport interdiction unit. At kung titingnan mo, Mr. Chair, lahat ng provincial offices na budget, talagang 40,000 lang, Mr. Chair, ang budget. Kasama na doon, Mr. Chair, yung rental. So talagang miniskill talaga, talagang nagmamakaawa yung mga provincial offices namin. That's why we allocated for the
That's
budget
40,000 per
province.
No. Period. Per quarter, per month?
Per month lang, sir.
Per month?
Yes, sir.
Kasama pa yung MO, yung rentals.
Kasama na yung renta, sir. Kasama na yung
And this is standard?
standard, Mr. Chair. Kasi, Mr. Chair, wala ka, ito, sir, Mr. Chair, yung pinapasok namin sa Magna Carta ngayon, nasa ma-organize yung provincial offices. Kasi walang, sa 9165 hanggang regional offices lang tayo eh. So, hindi mabigyan ng full complement ang provincial offices natin, Mr. Chair. Kung mabibigyan ng full complement sana ito, magiging talaga regular office na siya. hindi na siya ragtag, Mr. Chair. We budgeted, we asked for 80,000 per province, which is talagang tama-tama lang para makapag-conduct na sariling anti-drug operation ng mga probinsya, Mr. Chair. So, isa yan, sir, dun sa na nakalagay dyan, Mr. Chair. And program for Barangay Drug Clearing Program doon sa number 6, isinama naman namin yung Mr. Chair doon sa pads ng DDB, Mr. Chair. Kung isasama sa DDB. If not, nilagay namin dito, Mr. Chair, yung Barangay Drug Clearing. Dahil ito talaga yung, Mr. Chair, ito talaga yung inaasahan natin na magpapaayos ng national drug situation natin, Mr. Chair. Itong Barangay Drug Clearing Program. At in-itemize naman namin ito para makita kung paano natin ginagastos itong Barangay Drug Clearing Program natin, Mr. Chair. So, total dito, Mr. Chair, is 1.6 million additional billions, Mr. Chair. This is for the year 2001. That is over and above dun sa binigay ng BBM, Mr. Chair. That ends my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I noticed lang, di ba yung sa EO66, maliwanag doon yung sa patch, yung sa strategy,
Yes, sir.
na meron doong program conversion, with the indulgence of my colleagues, before I recognize them, merong program convergence budgeting.
Yes.
So nakatag yung mga agencies involved, yung DOH, what else? DOJ, DILD, SOX, even GOCCs, di ba? So meron silang nakalagay doon, specific eh. Ang bulk nito pupunta sa DOH, 1.28 billion. I noticed, and so forth and so on, bakit walang nakatag sa 4 pods under the proposed 2021 budget
Wala
of the
nga,
PDEA?
Mr.
Ba't
Chair.
kayo nawala? Kayo yung lead agency.
Yun nga, Mr. Chair, ang
Parang may problema ng konti. Anyway, we'll discuss it later. But in the meantime, the chair would like to acknowledge the virtual presence of the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Rilon, and also Senator Bong Revilla. And with the permission of Senator Aimee, nakikiusap lang si Senator Bongo kung pwedeng mauna lang yung manifestation niya. Is that all right with you? Okay, Senator Bongo is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good day. PDEA Director General Wilkins Villanueva, Yusek Benjamin Reyes, and to all the resource persons with us today. I wish to manifest my support to the budgets of PDEA and the Dangerous Drugs Board. Much has been said about the drug menace and its capacity to destroy the lives of its victims. As I have said before, illegal drugs and drug-related crimes is a complex of problem which requires a multifaceted solution. I call on PDEA to ensure that all drug-related issues in the country are being addressed accordingly. Importante po kay Pangulong Duterte na ma-eliminate ang ito problema natin sa droga. Sa nalalabing panahon po niya bilang Pangulo, we have to be relentless and intensify our operations against illegal drugs, against our campaign against illegal drugs. Sugpuin ninyo ang mga organisasyon at mga sindikato na involved sa illegal na droga. Alam po ito ni Director General Wilkins Villanueva. Tagal po siya nanungkulan sa Davao noon. And of course, ang ating mas alam po ng ating chairman paano sugpuin yung illegal na droga. Anti-illegal drug operations conducted by our law enforcement agencies, particularly PDEA, is just one aspect of the solution. Another aspect is rehabilitation and recovery of drug dependents who should be treated as victims in their need of medical, psychological, and spiritual health. We must give them a chance to be reintegrated successfully into society as healthy and productive citizens of the country. Our ultimate goal must be to reduce the negative impacts of drug abuse in the society. Sustainable programs of treatment and rehabilitation must be an integral part of the unrelenting campaign against illegal drugs. As chairman of the Committee on Health, one of my priorities is the rehabilitation and treatment of drug dependence. In fact, I filed the Senate Bill number 399, which mandates the establishment of a drug abuse treatment and rehabilitation center in every province in the country. Last year, when I defended the budget of the Department of Health, I supported the increase in the budget of the operation of dangerous drugs abuse treatment and rehabilitation centers as proposed by Senate President Soto. Through these centers, drug dependents can pick up pieces of their lives that have fallen apart due to illegal drugs. In the past years, President Duterte inaugurated drug rehabilitation centers like the one in Bukidnon and another one in Nueva Ecija. And also through the initiative of Senator Cynthia Villar and her family, we also established a drug rehab center in Las Piñas. I urge the Dangerous Drugs Board to work closely with the Department of Health for us to completely succeed against the evils brought about by illegal drugs and to cure the addiction of the victims. Yun lang po, full support po ako sa PDEA at sa Dangerous Drugs Board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bongo. Senator Amy Marcos is recognized.
Thank you very much, my colleagues, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Lacson, and the Minority Leader, Senator Go. Yes, I just have a few quick questions about the budget of PDEA. It's a matter of some alarm that there's been a reduction from the original request to the NEP recommended budget of upwards of 52%. So I'd like to ask DG Wilkins, alin dito yung mga priority niya? Kasi sa ating PDEA, maliwanag yung sinabi ni Yusek, nakita ko yung bawas halos nasa ICT. For maintenance in terms of training, it's in your MOE. Andon rin sa capital outlay na sabi naman ninyo, nabili na. Pero kung madadagdagan natin kahit kapraso, ano ang pinaka-priority po ninyo? Kasi nangangamba to. Meron kayong two-tiered proposal ng DDB. It cannot be supported by the extant 2021 proposed budget. What do you think we should prioritize po?
Mr. Chair, first is yung the construction of PDEA Regional Office 10, which is 35 million. This
Okay.
is capital outlay. We would like to enhance the operational capability of the regional offices through mobility.
Okay, so sasakyan yan.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Kung medyo papayag, Mr. Chair, we have been conducting the regions 11, 9, 10, and 12, and BARM. Actually, last years ago, talagang namatayan tayo doon, Mr. Chair, sa Lanao del Sur. Doing demand reduction campaign, Mr. Chair. We would mahalaga kasi si Mr. Chair yung buhay ng talagang every agents of PDEA, Mr. Chair, is mahalaga. That's why we pray that we will have them, we can give them semi-armored vehicle for those regions in Mindanao, at least one, para talagang mapagplanuhan man, Mr. Chair, may chance na mabuhay ang mga tao natin. And of course, yung support ng newly established and established Seaport Interdiction Unit. Maliit lang naman ito, Mr. Chair. This is only 36 million. This can, ito na yung check ng mga route of smuggling of dangerous drugs. And
Yes.
dun sa ship side, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're very familiar with that in Ilocos because that occurred many times in the past 2 decades. So, magkano yung support dun sa dalawa mong bagong Seaport Interdiction Unit? Sabi mo 36 million, tama ba yun?
36 million, Mr. Chair, ang yung newly established and proposed, sama-sama na ito, Mr. Chair, Seaport Interdiction Unit, Airport
Yep.
Interdiction Unit, and Land Transportation Interdiction Unit. Ito naman yung sa area ng Cordillera Autonomous Region Administrative region, Mr. Chair, dahil wala silang seaport at wala silang airport. This is only 36 million, Mr. Chair.
Lahat na yan kasama seaport, local airport at land interdiction ng Cordillera.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, itatanong ko lang, noong 2019, I recall, Mr. Chair, that the DDB provided 106 million as financial assistance to BJMP, the Bureau of Corrections, Davao Prison, Farm College, Bikutan, DOH-TRC, a whole number of TRCs, considering that these agencies, like the Bureau of Jail and Penology, clearly have their own budgets, why did the DDB still give them financial assistance? And ito 2019 to eh. Wala pa kasi kompleto yung report ng 2020. So, ano yung financial assistance na tinutukoy sa iba't ibang ahensyang to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Undersecretary Reyes can respond.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, yan po yung sa special account po natin for the establishment of treatment and rehab programs, even inside BJMP. As mentioned by DJ Wilkins, ma'am,
Yes.
meron po kasi tayong mga clients na mga pushers na gumagamit din. And we find na hindi po natin sila pwedeng i-mix, ma'am, sa ordinary treatment and rehab centers natin, no? Kasi iba po yung security requirements for them. And so,
I see.
together with the ILG, we agreed na dapat po one region, at least for BJMP.
I see, I
Dapat meron-
understand.
Yes, ma'am.
I see. So meron kaya iba-iba to, may Davao Prison, may
Yes, ma'am.
Bikutan, may Lukban, kasi one per region.
Yes, ma'am, hopefully po.
Pero lampas to ng 77 million na automatic appropriation ninyo, umabot to ng 106 plus million eh.
Yes, ma'am. Because of in 2020, ma'am, we were allowed to utilize all the collections
I see.
ng DDB. So usually, ma'am, we collect more than 100 million per year, no, from PAGCOR, PCSO, and other fees collected by the DDB. Yun nga po yung sinasabi namin kanina, kasi for this year's budget, ma'am, napeg na naman po kami sa 77, which is
I see.
kulang na kulang po, ma'am.
Yes. And
I'm sorry,
considering-
Senator Marcos. 106 million yung expenditures nyo, no?
Opo, sir.
Yes.
Yung for support
2020 or 2019?
2019.
2019.
Yes, sir.
And yet,
Mm.
77 lang yung
Pinag
nirelease sa
ngayon,
inyo.
sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Marcos.
Yes, that's right. Kaya ako nalilito rito kasi parang lumiliit pa na imbes na lumalaki. So, syempre dapat natin tulungan sana. So, yung sa ating 77 million, ang hinihingi ninyo na i-delete na yung PEG.
Correct po, ma'am.
Nalilito ako. Alin yung PEG? Kasi sabi ninyo may cap sa 2021. Alin yung PEG, alin yung cap? Sorry
Bali,
lang, clarify lang.
Mr. Chair, actually binalik po, Mr. Chair, yung cap previously in the previous budgets, Mr. Chair.
On
Natanggal na sa
2020, wala na kayong cap.
yun nga, ma'am.
Sa 2021, biglang nagka-cap
Bumalik.
na kayo.
Tama po, ma'am. Bumalik. Kaya nga po nire-request namin, mawala sana kasi nga ang dami nating kailangang suportahan, ma'am.
Kulang na nga eh.
Kulang na nga po, nilagyan pa ng cap.
And
Okay.
even without the cap, actually may cap pa rin. Hindi yan sa 77. Di ba? Versus expenditures, kinap pa rin nila sa 87. Tama? Okay.
Yes, that's right. So, given that may deduction na kayo na lampas 52%, meron pang cap o PEG itong automatic appropriation ninyo, mabigat-bigat yung tama sa inyo. So, I think we need to help them po, Mr. Chair, and I would endorse that. Also, sa ating PDEA Director naman, alam po natin na, and it's with great relief that we hear of the continued emphasis on the harm reduction approach. Ngunit eto nga, sa panahon ng COVID, hindi na natin maaasahan na yung barangay clearing at yung iba't iba pang balay silangan na hindi pa napapatayo ay gagawin ng LGU, hindi na makayanan ng LGU. At wala naman makita masyadong bahagi ng budget ninyo na tinutumbok itong harm reduction, specifically your barangay initiatives. Paano kaya ito?
Mr. Chair, nakalagay po ito sa number 6 sa PDEA additional request for congressional
Nasa
initiative.
additional request pero wala dun sa NEP. Hindi siya na-approve ng DBM, hindi siya kasali?
Hindi, kasama siya sa MOOE, Mr. Chair.
Pero
Doon pa
magkano
siya
lang?
papasok.
Kasi, ang alam ko kasi, marami pa ring probinsya na wala talagang balay silangan. At kung meron man, wala naman silang budget para sa doktor, sa toxicologist, sa iba't ibang trabahador, lalo na sa COVID ngayon. So, kayo ang titignan niyan.
That's why, Mr. Chair, dapat papasok siya doon sa convergence ng different, ng whole of nation. Doon siya
Kaso
papasok sa budget.
napansin nga ni
Mr. Chair.
Chair na kayo pa ang natanggalan ng budget dun sa convergence ng PADS.
Ma'am, if I may add, ma'am, just to add some information. Actually, we requested for a total of around 9 billion, ma'am, as far as PADS Convergence Fund is concerned. What was allocated is only 2 billion, ma'am. Kasama po sana dapat doon yung sa PDEA. Hindi po naibigay, ma'am.
I see, I understand.
That I cannot really understand. Excuse me, Senator Marcos.
Yes,
Hindi ko
please,
maintindihan.
go ahead, Chair.
PDEA is the lead
nalilito eh.
implementing agency, And yet, under the PADS, sila yung walang budget. I really cannot, I don't get it.
Yun na nga, ang labo nga yung DOH at DILG, tuloy-tuloy yung mismong lead agency, wala.
Mr. Chair, kaya nga, what I'm plan to do is go to Department of Budget and Management and talk to Secretary. Kasi siguro representation talaga, Mr. Chair. But since bago pa ako, hindi ko pa talaga napupuntahan and because of the pandemic, talaga hindi kami makabisita, Mr. Chair. But talagang dapat i-push through ito, Mr. Chair.
Oo, isa pa, napansin ko at nabalitaan ko nung nakaraang linggo lang yata, September 8, yung mukha yung PDEA, DDB at saka FDA, meron kayang memo of agreement to regulate and monitor yung controlled and addictive drugs and substances. Sabi, magpo-provide ng resource speakers, tapos mag-a-update yung mga ephedra na contained dun sa so-called Chinese COVID medicine, assist each other in the conduct of the investigation. Mukhang wala na namang budget to. Kasi additional to, di ba, yung MOA ninyo sa FDA? Yes, please.
If I may, Mr. Chair. Actually, ma'am, sinama po namin sa aming Tier 2 yung mga activities na ganyan po, including yung mga ICT projects kasi nga po, we're moving towards online advocacies.
Wala na kayong two-tier kasi nangalahati yung budget ninyo. Wala na si two-tier. Paano to?
Yun nga, ma'am, and we're requesting po sana na maibigay. Yun lang po ang aming request.
Nawalop yung tier 2 nyo, no?
Wala
Boss,
na
Mr. Chair, 289,373. Ang naibigay lang is 105,852.
Yun nga the other thing is, and I was witness to this when I was governor, you were complaining earlier that PDEA is so grossly understaffed. But I noticed that you have almost 200 unfilled positions. Kung understaffed kayo, na talaga naman totoo, bakit unfilled pa rin? Problema ba mag-recruit? Mababa ba yung sahod? Ano ba yung issue? Kasi kapag natin ang budget yan, hindi naman pala ninyo napupuno.
No, Mr. Chair. Kaya hindi kami makapag-recruit ngayon, Mr. Chair, is because of hindi pa kami binibigyan ng approval ng IATF para makapag-recruit, particularly yung neuropsychological examination. Kasi we're about to recruit PDEA agents, drug enforcement officers. Bulk of that are the drug enforcement officers. At hindi more than mga 185 yata, Mr. Chair. At hindi pa kami makapag-recruit right now. It's because hindi pa nga kami binibigyan ng authority to recruit, particularly dun sa conduct of neuropsychological examination, Mr. Chair.
I see, I see. So there's no real difficulty in recruitment. The problem just is the COVID lockdowns.
You're right, Mr. Chair. Because of the pandemic, Mr. Chair, that hindered us to recruit personally, Mr. Chair.
But in the past, you've also had vacancies in many of the provinces.
Actually, Mr. Chair, out of the 297 plantilla position, 73 na lang dito yung admin, and then 38 yung technical. Dito
Yes.
sa technical, Mr. Chair, medyo problema kami dito dahil maliit ang sweldo namin na entry level, Mr. Chair, as compared to the Philippine National Police. Kaya parati na lang talaga kaming talagang pangatlong choice na lang kami parati.
Yeah,
So
that's
laptop
right.
talaga yung nakukuha namin, Mr. Chair.
O tama yun eh. Yun na nga ang tutumbukin ko. Kasi ang pagkaalam ko, naglipatan sa pulis eh. Dahil nga sa sahod. So, sana magawa ng paraan sapagkat grossly understaffed talaga yung PDEA. That will be all, Mr. Chair. Many thanks. And I do endorse an augmentation of the budget of both groups, DDB particularly having lost over 52%, as well as PDEA, which seems to have no funding at all for its enforcement duties. Thank you po.
Also for the augmentation, I hope, Senator Marcos. Yeah, Senator Revilla, are you around? If not, I'll recognize the minority leader. Senator Drilon is recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very few questions. I would ask this annually when the budget of the PDEA would be before us. So I'll start with what is our inventory of the illegal drugs, both on volume and kind, for the end of 2019 compared to, say, mid-year. Would you have the figures, Mr. Director? The inventory of confiscated drugs.
Mr. Chair, good morning. Right now, we have on our inventory a total of 2.82 tons of different kinds of dangerous drugs, 1.867 of which is methamphetamine hydrochloride, and others are marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, ephedrine, that consist of the 2.82 tons of dangerous drugs, Mr. Chair.
2.82 tons.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Compared to, say, end of 2019. Do you have a figure?
Mr. Chair, just last August.
Excuse me, ganito na lang, Wilkins. Compare mo lang yung figures doon sa nung tinanong last year ni Senator Drilon sa
Yes.
pagtanong niya ngayon. 2.82 tons ngayon. Noong last budget deliberations, tinanong niya rin yan, ilan noon? Para mas may comparison tayo.
Actually, Mr. Chair, itong last lang natin, from August 31, we just destroyed 2.9 kilos, 2.1 kilos, tons of shabu. Estimated value is 13.36 billion. Ito, Mr. Chair, yung pinakamalaking destruction sa history ng Philippines, Mr. Chair, na na-destroy natin just August 31 of this year, Mr. Chair.
You didn't answer my question. Ano yung inventaryo year-end ng 2019 na lang? Okay. Compared to the 2.82 tons now.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yung current.
Hinahanap lang namin, Mr. Chair.
Kasi kung nakadestroy pa kayo ng 2.1 tons,
Ito, Mr. Chair.
nasa mga 5 tons last year to, ibig sabihin.
Nung destruction, Mr. Chair, hinahanap lang namin dito, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, can I go to another question and maybe
Meantime, yes, please proceed. Please continue.
time? The reason why we're asking this question, as the chair probably knows, we raise this every budget time of PDEA. But in fairness, I have not heard in the news recently about the recycling business of law enforcement officer as we have seen before. Is that a correct assumption, Mr. Chairman, that we don't have that much, the recycling is not that much of a problem today?
Yeah, as a background, before you answer, Director General Villanueva, as a background, the former PDEA Director General admitted, in a budget deliberation also, na talaga merong recycling. Doon ang pinanggagalingan ni Senator Drilon doon sa tanong niya na talaga bang wala na recycling o hindi lang nare-report?
Mr. Chair, talagang mahigpit tayo. Ang PDEA is mahigpit talaga right now as far as recycling. Kahit yung chismis lang ng recycle, Mr. Chair, talagang pinupurso natin yung information. And right now, wala kaming naririnig, Mr. Chair, ng something about recycling of dangerous drugs.
Okay.
Katunayan dito, Mr. Chair, yun ng 878 kilos na nakuha sa Marilao at itong part of that is dito sa PDEA. Nakapag-destroy tayo, Mr. Chair, ng 2.82 na tons of shabu, Mr. Chair. Ito yung commitment talaga na talagang lahat na nakukuha, Mr. Chair, talagang dinidestroy na natin. And this November, Mr. Chair, itong natitirang 300 kilos of methamphetamine, di-destroy na naman namin. Scheduled to be destroyed na naman, Mr. Chair, this November.
Mr. Chairman, as you are probably aware, we always ask this question because we are concerned of the huge inventory of confiscated drugs. And I do not know if the director is aware of the provision of the law which requires the destruction of confiscated illegal drugs within 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken, from the confiscation of these illegal drugs and, of course, after notice to the judge who issued the search warrant and taking a sample of the drugs, both as to volume and quality, which will be the one presented in the course of the trial. Upon my prodding, Mr. Chairman, as you will recall, the Supreme Court initiated a memorandum of agreement with the PDEA in order to facilitate the burning of this inventory of illegal drugs. Pursuant to that MOA, what is the volume of confiscated illegal drugs that have been destroyed, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, really, we are still waiting for the order of the court, Mr. Chair. That is why this coming November we are scheduled to burn 300. We are scheduled to burn more than 300 kilos, Mr. Chair. Part of dito sa natitira dito, Mr. Chair, is itong 355 kilograms na nasa magnetic lifter na nakuha. This is still pending yung case in court, Your Honor. That is why hindi pa mabigyan ng court order. We have the
Mr. Director, let me interrupt you. Firstly, the fact of the pendency of the case is not a justification for not implementing the law which requires burning of this contraband. Because under the law, in the presence of the judge, counsel for the accused, the prosecutor, and I think an official of the barangay will a portion or a sample of the confiscated drug, including the weight, will be reduced in writing, and the order will be issued for the destruction of this of these drugs. In the hearing of the budget of the judiciary, Mr. Director, we were informed that they have issued a memorandum to the judges to implement this, and they have gone through one one destruction pursuant to the MOA. So it is not correct that you are waiting for the order of the court to implement this, because there is already an order from the court administrator to facilitate this. And I am a little concerned that you have not been fully appraised of this provision of the law, which will hopefully help in the spreading, in the distribution of contraband drugs from the confiscated confiscated contraband. We do recall that famous Pampanga episode, which somehow dragged the name of Director General Abayalde when he was the provincial director or regional director, where the a good number of kilos of illegal drugs disappeared after it was confiscated by the raiding team. So this is, and I'm sure it went to, it went to the market as recycled drugs. So this is the reason why we are particular about implementing this provision of the law, which requires the destruction of the contraband, and at the same time safeguard the evidence of the prosecution by just getting a sample, weighing the contraband, get the quality of all of the, or in the presence of a representative of the court, a representative of the accused, of the prosecution, etc. So apparently you have not been briefed of this, Mr. Director.
Mr. Chair, I commit to conduct destruction of this drug evidence before timely for November,
With the permission
Mr.
of
Chair.
Senator Drilon, just to amplify, yung memorandum issued by the court administrator has effectively waived the other requirements ng lower courts in order to destroy. Yun di ba? The confiscated drugs. So I think you should secure a copy of that memorandum issued by the court administrator to the lower courts. Yun ang invoke nyo na, and disseminate this to your people on the ground para ma-expedite yung destruction ng confiscated drugs, because that is a very, very valid concern aired by the Senate Minority Leader. Kasi dito nagsisimula yung temptation to recycle, because this involves big amounts of money. Di ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, I
we
will
will
ask you
write
now,
the court.
do you have a copy of that memorandum issued by the Office of the Court Administrator? Wala pa?
We have, Your Honor.
Oh, yun
Nasa-
pala dapat in-implement yun na.
Yung nga,
So,
Your
going
Honor,
back to the
ipa-follow-
previous question of the Minority Leader, ano yung comparison from last year doon sa present inventory niya? Sabi mo kanina, 2.82 tons yung present inventory. Di ba? Of confiscated drugs.
halo-halo na yon, Mr.
No,
Chair.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Never mind the whatever kinds of drugs there are, Ang concern ni Senator Drilon, kung nakapag-destroy kayo ng 2.1 tons as you claim last June. So therefore,
Yes, Your Honor.
not lower than 5 or 4.982 tons yung nasa inventory nyo dapat last year.
2019, Your Honor, is 3.33 tons.
Oh, teka, mali ang arithmetic. It doesn't add up, ha? Kasi kung nagsira kayo ng 2.1 tons,
nag-destroy tayo.
teka, sandali, ha? Sabi mo kanina, ito nilista ko kasi,
2.1.
sagot mo kay Senator Drilon, ang present inventory nyo ngayon is 2.82 tons. Presently, nandiyan sa stock room nyo,
Yes, Mr.
evidence
Chair.
room.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Nakasira kayo ng 2.1 tons.
Yes,
last
Mr.
June.
Chair. Yes, sir.
So, ang total nun, 4.982 tons. Bakit noong 2019, 3 plus tons lang yung parang kulang yung arithmetic natin, hindi tama.
Mr. Chair, to give
But,
the director.
Senator
Mr.
Drilon,
Chair-
recognized.
Yes.
But-
The director is new in his post. We will not insist on the answers at this time. But we request the chair to require the director to submit to the chair the pertinent data before
Plenary.
the budget is placed on the floor in plenary, and what are his plans in order that we can see a substantial reduction, if not a total elimination of this inventory without prejudicing the ability of the prosecution to prosecute these cases. And this can be done, Mr. Director. And as I said, apparently you are not familiar with this. In order to save time, we will request the chair to require the resource person or director to submit to the committee the data that we have requested and what he plans to do in order to accelerate the implementation of the law, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mr. Chair, from here, we will be writing all the lower courts who has the jurisdiction of dangerous drugs and ask for the distraction para sumabay, Mr. Chair, sa November. And that's what we will do, Mr. Chair. And we will submit the inventory of dangerous drugs immediately, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And
And
also,
I will pound on you because I don't want to be placed in a situation where Senator Drilon will be asking me in plenary the same questions.
we're particular about the inventory at the end of the year. What is the inventory as of the latest count? And what are the plans of the good director in trying in implementing the law through the memorandum issued by the court administrator to the lower courts in order to implement the destruction of this contraband. Just one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, before you proceed, I would like to recognize or acknowledge the presence virtually of Senator Coco Pimentel. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. Just one more question, Mr. Director. In this year's budget, I amended and the budget of the PDEA to include the sum of 25 billion for the rehabilitation of the drug rehabilitation center in Iloilo, my home province, which drug rehabilitation center I visited, and they really needed funds for the rehabilitation of their own compound. They have been trying to perform their job to the extent, to the best of their ability with their limited budget. So may I ask the director if he is aware of if this 25 billion additional budget for the Iloilo Rehabilitation Center has been implemented?
Uh, I believe, Mr. Chair, we don't have knowledge on the 25 million, Mr. Chair. Hindi po sa amin nakalagay yon, Mr. Chair, because we don't have anything to do with the rehabilitation facility, Mr. Chair. It might be with the Dangerous Drugs Board or the DOH, Mr. Chair.
All right, wherever it is, can you take can we rely on you to check on this or in
Mr.
coordination
Chair.
with whichever agency?
Undersecretary
Mr. Chair.
Reyes would like to respond with the permission.
Yes,
of,
Mr. Chair. Actually, the allocation was inserted in the budget of the Department of Health, Mr. Chair. I'm just not aware, Mr. Chair, if they were able to use the amount given the DBM circular, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll just inquire from the Department of Health. We have no more questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to raise issues with our resource persons.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Senator Coco Pimentel is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions. I have been informed that the reduction from request to net figure for the DDB is 520 minus 344. So around 180 million. Tama ba yun? And then for PDEA, 166 million pesos ang ang hindi pa na-accommodate sa NEP?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Are
On
those,
the part of DDB.
on the part of DDB, correct? And the part of PDEA, correct? 166 reduction? Or not granted, not accommodated?
Actually, Mr. Chair,
There are two bases of comparison dito, no? First, yung comparison ng budget ng 2020 sa 2021 as proposed, ano? Second, yung comparison between the proposed budget na hindi na-adapt sa NEP. So para
Yes.
lang malinaw.
Second, the second concept, my question is about the second concept, the requested budget versus the net figure for the agency. So,
Please respond.
parehong malaki ang amount na hindi accommodated. Tama po ba 'yan? Is that the correct characterization? Kasi ang next question ko diyan is the fight against dangerous drugs or illegal drugs still a priority? Because the budget proposed by the executive must reflect the priorities of the administration initially proposing the budget.
Mr. Chair, malaki ang kinaltas, Mr. Chair. Sa capital outlay lang, Mr. Chair, there's a decrease of 423 million, Mr. Chair. While in the MOOE, there's a decrease of 36 million, Mr. Chair. So, ang tinaasan lang talaga dito, Mr. Chair, is yung personal services, which is talaga namang pang personal yon, Mr. Chair. So kung you will carry out the anti-drug operation, anti-drug campaign, we're more or less, there's a decrease of more than 559 million, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
That's which agency is answering? PDEA?
That's for PDEA,
PDEA.
Mr. Chair.
PDEA for the law enforcement yan, ano? So
Yes, Mr. Chair.
550.
That's for law enforcement and capital outlay, Mr. Chair.
Oh yes, capital outlay related to your law enforcement duties. Okay. So who's representing in the cabinet meetings? Who represents this sector, the DDB and the PDEA?
Yeah, who's representing daw?
Sa
Sino-
cabinet
sino-
meetings,
cabinet
Mr.
meeting-
Chair, hindi po kasama ang chairman unless required to attend, Mr. Chair, and there are concerns regarding the drug issue.
O kaya nga, so,
Regular cabinet meetings, hindi kasama. Pag special cabinet meetings, saka tinatawag. Okay.
ganun lang. So there is no regular voice for this, tawagin ko na lang kayong sector, the dangerous drugs enforcement sector. Wala, you are not regularly represented through a secretary, through a department in the cabinet.
Usually, Mr. Chair, we are represented, we report directly to the executive secretary, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so OP itself pala. Okay. So through the ES. Okay, so yan. Siguro one step, you're just a heartbeat away. So yung concerns nga natin, narinig ko yung si director who is new to the PDEA. Who is the director new to the PDEA? Who just who answered earlier?
Director General Wilkins Villanueva,
Si Wilkins.
formerly of Region 10, your region. Regional
Yes.
Director.
Yes.
Now Director General.
Now who had not yet had the time to meet with DBM Secretary Abisado. So you please raise your budget concerns, sir, kung maremedyohan pa at the executive branch. Kami naman dito naman sa Senate, meron pang chance plenary. But my question is, because I'm not quite familiar with your sector, yung mga regulations, for example, that yung Chinese herbal supplement na Lingua Qingwan.
Yeah.
Qingwan.
LQ tablet, sir. When
The Lingua tablet na, for example, some people were willing to try during COVID, some out of desperation, but some out of advice from friends. Parang natakot pa because of a policy or there was a resolution from DDB ba yun, that contains an element from a plant which is considered to be regulated drug substance. Ano, can you give us a background, and then kailangan pa bang gawin yan even if let us say napaka-konti na lang nung element involved at saka let us say cleared na ito ng FDA of the regulatory body of a country with a significant population already consuming, using the item not for recreational drugs purposes but for health purposes. So can you just give me a little background on bakit parang na-regulate pa yon yung lingwa?
Thank you.
Lianwa.
Lianwa tablet, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, sir, hindi siya talaga indicated for COVID, but palliative siya for other side effects, Mr. Chair, like pneumonia. No, you're correct, Mr. Chair. It contains ephedra, which is a regulated substance under Republic Act 9165 and under UN conventions. If you will recall, Mr. Chair, we attach the list of controlled precursors in the law, Mr. Chair, 9165. And under the law, Mr. Chair, if you're a listed substance, therefore it needs regulation, Mr. Chair. As far as the Dangerous Drugs Board is concerned, Mr. Chair, we agreed na basta in medicine form, Mr. Chair, and it undergoes registration sa ating local FDA, Mr. Chair, no? Then it can be used as a medication, Mr. Chair. Yun lang, Mr. Chair, dahil kasama siya sa listing ng UN conventions and as well as Republic Act 9165, there are some regulatory precautions na nilalagay. So this can only be prescribed by an S2 licensed physician. Yun lang, Mr. Chair, naman ang ni-require natin. Hindi na natin ni-require, Mr. Chair, yung additional yellow prescription pad. The purpose being, Mr. Chair, is just to monitor, no? For diversion, baka nadadivert, Mr. Chair. I think we are all aware, Mr. Chair, because of the popularity of the LQ tablets, lingua tablets, ang dami ngayon nagkalat. Ang suspicion namin, Mr. Chair, smuggled from China kasi nga Chinese pa yung nakalagay, no? And
Mr.
also,
Chair?
With the permission of Senator Pimentel, Senator Marcos.
Sorry. Yes, Senator Coco, Chairman Ping. If I might add, it requires a prescription, but I think there's FDA approval already. I don't know about the smuggled ones, but it already has FDA prescription, registration and accreditation. However, it needs a doctor's prescription because it's also contraindicated for high blood pressure, hypertension, pregnant women, and so on. So, kailangan niya ng doktor. And yun nga yung rinereklamo nila because it's supposed to be traditional Chinese medicine, but in as much as it contains ephedra or ephedrine, it really needs to be physician prescribed. My brother used it, that's why I know po.
Thank you, ma'am. Correct po. Lahat po ng dinagdag ni Honorable Ma'am Amy. Yun po yung mga requirements ng FDA din po, just to be cautious, no? Kasi may mga plant products po na contraindicated for some individuals with existing co-occurring morbidities. So yun lang naman yun, Mr. Chair. But as long as it underwent FDA registration, yung locally produced, sigurado po tayo. Ang iniiwasan lang natin, Mr. Chair, yung mga smuggled. Kasi hindi tayo sigurado, Mr. Chair, yung quality ng mga smuggled, yung mga may Chinese characters pa, Mr. Chair, hindi natin mabasa kung ano talaga yung content nun. But as long as it passes through FDA, then okay naman po yan as issued by the board regulation, Mr. Chair.
So yes, Mr. Chairman. So ang status yata ngayon, that particular tablet has secured FDA approval, but as explained to us by the chairman, it needs an S2 prescription. So,
Correct,
so
Mr. Chair.
legal na for as long as mayroong S2. Kaya ako natanong
Correct,
kasi yun, kasi sabi ko baka lobby ito ng mga Western pharmaceuticals na sila lang ang pwedeng i-dispense ng mga doctors natin. But ngayon, pwede na. Nagtataka lang po ako if you, Chairman, if you mentioned the UN list. What is this UN list? And then ang next question ko, how come sa country of origin, China, even they know for a fact that that appears on a UN list, but how come they allowed it to be incorporated in a tablet widely used by their people?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yung po, sir, yung UN Drug Convention list signed 1961, 1972, and 1988. Basically, Mr. Chair, we follow all the listed drugs and precursor substances. Ibig sabihin, pag nakalista doon, Mr. Chair, kailangan ng konting precaution kasi it can be diverted, can be used illegally. And we adopted that, Mr. Chair, sa RA 9165. Ang China, Mr. Chair, hindi po ganon. Hindi nila inattach yung list sa ating sa kanilang batas. Kaya po mas maluwag sila. Tayo, Mr. Chair, we need to follow, sir, yung attachment sa 9165 po.
Okay, so parang may force of law pala. So kaming legislators ang mag-review nun if you want to update the list or modernize the list given new developments. Ganun po ba?
Correct po, Mr. Chair. Tama po.
So, okay, the ball is with in the court of the legislator. So anyway, the Chinese government through the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party, has manifested their willingness to donate to the Philippines siguro unlimited unlimited quantity of Lianhua tablets. So should this be accepted po by our government, do you see any problem, Chairman, o wala nang problem kasi FDA approved na?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, pwede po yan. The Department of Health issued a memorandum circular, Mr. Chair, defining the process on how to accept yung mga ganyan po mga donations. So, dadaan po yon, Mr. Chair, sa Department of Health and through FDA.
Kaya nga. So, if a private person, private businessman, a chamber of commerce receives an offer of donation, siguro ang pinaka-safe, i-refer na lang niya sa Department of Health and then para sundin na ng DOH yung protocol nila o procedure. Baka, kasi meron pa kasi kayo mga pronouncement, kaya medyo yung mga private individuals, medyo ipasa na lang natin sa Department of Health, no? Chairman, is that a good advice?
That's a good advice, Mr. Chair. Just to follow, sir, yung FDA procedures po and the Department of Health. Of course, Mr. Chair, pag i-dispense na po ito, no, sa mga users po natin, again, as mentioned by Honorable Ma'am Amy, kailangan pa rin po ng prescription ng ating S2 license physician. But that would be most welcome, Mr. Chair, kung may magdo-donate.
May maraming offer nga mag-donate pero ino-offer nila kasi sa private individual. Pwede ba tanggapin ng private individual yan? But not this.
Better, Mr. Chair, through the Department of Health. Kasi, sir, may in-issue po sila na guidelines on that.
Okay. So ganun na lang din na-advise ko na we welcome the donation but we course it through the DOH. Okay. So ganun. Tapos ito yata operation yata to ng PDEA na parang narinig ko na we arrested a staff or employee of a multilateral organization based here in Manila who made the mistake of ordering by mail an item which is legal from the country of origin, but pagdating dito naman, meron na naman daw traces of an element of marijuana, parang ganon. So kasi the few times that I have been abroad, especially in Europe, marami ng items po ngayon na nababasa ko na merong CBD ba yun? CBD, and then kasi sa marijuana yata, there are THC, CBD, and then the addictive element is the THC, and then there's the element with the medicinal purpose would be the CBD. Tapos, and yet if you are caught with an item with CBD ingredients here, that would be against the law. So can we be guided here or can we be clarified? Kasi I'm sure maraming dati pre-COVID, those who went abroad might have bought some of these newly marketed or newly available items. Who can help me here, the DDB or the PDEA?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. Actually, sir, marijuana contains more than 100 cannabinoids, Mr. Chair. This includes what you mentioned, yung tetrahydrocannabinol and yung CBD cannabidiol, Mr. Chair, no? Pero marami yan, Mr. Chair. Now, out of the hundreds of cannabinoids, so far, Mr. Chair, ang nakikita nilang may potential na magamit talaga for medication is only CBD, Mr. Chair. Now, the problem, Mr. Chair, is the process of reclassifying CBD. Kasi sir, again, nakalagay po yan kasi yung marijuana, nakalagay po yan doon sa listing na sinasabi ko kanina ng UN conventions, which of course, signatory tayo, Mr. Chair, so we need to follow, no? Right now, Mr. Chair, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs in Vienna and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime is trying to study whether or not they will reclassify yung pong CBD, Mr. Chair. We were informed, Mr. Chair, that this December, during their reconvened session in Vienna, they will decide, Mr. Chair, once and for all, kung i-allow, Mr. Chair, yung CBD. Now, our difficulty, Mr. Chair, in our law under 9165, any part of the marijuana plant, no, yung seed, any component, is considered illegal, Mr. Chair. So sa ngayon, Mr. Chair, that's the reason why we are still not allowing yung CBD. We're waiting for the decision from the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And at the same time, Mr. Chair, we're also looking into ano ba talaga yung evidence, scientific evidence that CBD can be used for treating certain diseases, Mr. Chair.
Ako kasi, Mr. Chairman, ang concern ko lang is the confusion being caused. Naawa ko dun sa mga who suffer some legal consequences. Ngayon, Mr. Chairman, if you're saying that the Philippines strictly follows or adheres to the UN Convention, but I am sure some of these countries producing these items or cosmetic items or oils na may CBD are also signatories to that. Many, or if not all of them, are signatories. Then how come they have interpreted the UN Convention in such a way that they allow it in their markets, and then tayo we strictly interpret it, unless you tell me that it's beyond the UN Convention, it is our particular law which is stricter than their laws. So ano po ang analysis po natin, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, recently, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, 2 months ago, the board issued a resolution, Mr. Chair, na even if it contains a dangerous drugs listed under the UN conventions, as long as it is packaged in medicine form, Mr. Chair. Now, medicine form meaning may prescribed dosaging yan and may accepted dosage mechanism, Mr. Chair, maybe in pill form, no, yung ganon. And it should undergo FDA registration, Mr. Chair, then it can be adopted. A good example, Mr. Chair, is Epidulex. Basically, Mr. Chair, for muscle spasms yun, it was already approved sa US. It contains CBD, but in medicine form, Mr. Chair. So basically, Mr. Chair, yun, kung merong company na magpapasok dito sa atin, sir, nung CBD, it will be allowed basta ma-register sa FDA, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so yeah, if it is registered in the FDA, depende sa category niya, so pwede na siyang over the counter, but and then kung registered siya as medicine or a drug by medical doctor's prescription pa rin. So depende. Basta the flexibility is now there. So no need
Yes,
to
sir.
amend the law. No need to amend the law. So it's just a matter of interpretation by the DDB.
Yes, sir. It's a resolution, Mr. Chair, issued by the board. So far, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, wala pong nagpapasok, no? The only problem, Mr. Chair, hindi po siya pwedeng maging over the counter. Again, kasi nga, ano pa rin siya, it contains CBD, which is considered regulated pa rin, Mr. Chair. So it should need a prescription coming from an S2 licensed physician, which is overseen naman by PDEA, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so sana yung mga issuances din natin, sir, easy to understand. Kasi kung minsan kung paikot-ikot din na pati ako, abogado, pagbasa ko, umiikot na rin yung ulo ko na wala rin maka-comply, parang ganon.
We will, that's noted po, well taken, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so okay, basta one thing that was made clear to me this morning is the flexibility that we need to address the ever-changing situation made possible by advances in science or scientific findings, test results. The flexibility is already there in the law. Ang kailangan na lang talaga pala mag-aral on the latest scientific and medical findings. Hindi na kami mga mambabatas, kundi kayo na dyan sa DDB. Kayo dapat ang updated and abreast with all of these latest theories, findings, scientific studies with relevant evidence. Kayo po. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ang nagkaka-problem lang tayo kasi, sir, yung mga advocates, ini-insist nila yung raw product, Mr. Chair. No? Like, for example, in oil form, or yung mga dahon, hindi po kasi allowed yun. Dapat medicine form finished product, Mr. Chair.
Yung change in policy na yung raw product na ang gawing legal ay law na po yan. So sa amin po yan kasi change in policy talaga yan eh. Pero ngayon,
Tama po, Mr. Chair.
ang lumabas sa exchange natin ngayon is that yung mga, let us say, elements, there's something, an item is named in the UN Convention, an item is named in our law as a regulated or dangerous drugs, but this is just an element of the item. So the flexibility to allow its regulated use through an S2 or stricter license is already there in the law, and it's the DDB's call or responsibility to be updated with the latest scientific medical knowledge. Tama po ba yun, Mr. Chairman?
Tama po, Mr. Chair. In fact, Mr. Chair, we're treating each application individually, Mr. Chair, and we're discussing this. We are in coordination, Mr. Chair, with FDA. So bawat papasok po na application containing application for medication containing dangerous drugs, pinag-uusapan po yan mabuti ng FDA, PDEA at ng DDB po, Mr. Chair.
Okay, kaya nga. So the flexibility, basta yun ang natutunan ko ngayon. The flexibility is there. But if we want to change the policy, what to make illegal and what to make legal, kailangan batas po yun. Okay, sige. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Lacson. Salamat po sa panahon.
Thank you, Senator Coco.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay, I'll pursue the PADS issue, no? Kasi ito yung of course, yung drug problem, ito yung top priority, one of the top priorities of the administration, even when the president took over in 2016. And that's the reason why in 2018 he issued EO 66, di ba? But ang hindi ko lang ma-reconcile, bakit yung 2 billion plus budget for PADS, and this is a multi-agency approach, mind you, hindi ito DDB or PDEA. I-compare mo sa 4.5 trillion budget, anong ilang percent yan? 0.04? Si Senator Coco, magaling sa math ito. I think it's 0.04% of the total 4 plus trillion budget, yung 2 billion plus para sa PADS, no? 0.04 or 0.004, I don't know.
Si Amy, nag-calculator. Si Amy na lang, hindi ko na.
Anyway, and I would like to pursue that issue na ano bang treatment as per your strategy? Is this more of a law enforcement issue than a health issue? Or ano yung distribution? Kasi pag-strategy, nag-strategize ka, ano yung una mong i-approach? No?
Yes,
Kasi multi-agency. Kung titignan natin yung budget, do sa 2 billion plus, ang ibibigay sa DOH, 1.2 billion. So that's roughly 50%. So this is 50% health issue and ang ibibigay sa DILG, kalahati, 664 million. Kasama na yun sa PNP na 546 million. Okay. So law enforcement, ang component niya, 25%.
Yes, sir.
Is that really the strategy?
Actually, sir, kailangan, sir, balanced approach tayo, Mr. Chair. And we coordinated with 61 agencies, actually, and Mr. Chair, who submitted to us their work and financial
How
plans.
many agencies did
61, Mr. Chair.
And how many yung sa tagging, ano? Ilan yung inadapt ng DBM sa NEP?
Sa NEP, Mr. Chair, apat lang yung nandito,
Apat
Mr.
lang yung
Chair, eh.
agencies.
Yes, sir.
Not even PDEA is included.
Nawala, sir. Ang argument, Mr. Chair, some of the mandates daw kasi, sir, talagang adherent.
Nasa frontliners.
Yes, sir, nasa
PNP.
frontliner na.
No,
Kaya,
but sila yung lead agency. Eh. In fact, sa 9165,
correct.
lahat sa kanila i-coordinate eh.
Correct, sir.
Sila yung lead agency. So pagka binigyan mo yung pondo sa PNP at walang pondo yung PDEA, ano naman yung moral, hindi moral,
Tama.
ano yung financial ascendancy niya
Tama, sir.
over the frontliners?
Tama, sir.
Sino magko-coordinate kung yung distribution pa lang ng pondo nandoon na sa law enforcement? Now, back to my previous question. So ang treatment natin is health issue ito more than law enforcement issue. Kasi 50% compared to 25% of PADS budget para sa health
As reflected, sir.
sa budget.
Oo, sa budget, sir. But yun nga, dapat talagang 50-50. You cannot leave behind one component,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Otherwise, hindi in sync, di ba?
Correct, sir. Correct, sir.
And yung nangyayari sa ground, hindi natin masyado nakikita yung
Yes, sir.
health, yung in-address yung health
Yes, sir.
concern, di ba? Ang mas na-pronounce, at
Is
least
the
yung
enforcement.
na-highlight, law enforcement.
Correct, sir.
Kasi every day, nakikita natin may na-aresto, mayroong na-confiscate. So nandun yung focus. In fact, dito na yung papasok ng, di ba, sabi ng PDEA, after COVID, magre-resume ng Oplan Tokhang. So that's law enforcement. So why would the national government, the executive branch, kung saan nanggaling itong NEP, bakit ganon? Parang hindi logical yung hatian ng pondo pagdating sa strategy. So pag kaya ka nagawa ng strategy, yun ang guiding light mo, di ba? Doon ka lahat susunod. All the activities, programs, projects in support of the overall strategy. So kindly explain why.
As far as the Dangerous Drugs Board is concerned, Mr. Chair, we submitted all the work and financial plans provided to us by those 61 agencies, Mr. Chair. We are assuming that those budget will be used in performance of the respective functions, Mr. Chair. Sana, sir, maibigay pa rin.
This much in the presence of my colleagues, ano, sana magtulong-tulungan namin. This is a policy issue. Kaya pagdating ng DBCC plenary debate, I'm sure some of our colleagues will ask this question. Kung ang policy natin is nasa top priority natin yung laban sa illegal drugs, bakit minuscule yung budget na binigay sa PADS? Not DDB, not PDEA, but PADS, kasi multi-agency approach. And second, okay, doon sa Circular 580 na inisyo ng DBM, ang pinull out sa inyo, pinull out sa DDB 81.9 million. Sa PDEA 106 million, no? Out of the 400 million augmentation, ito yung congressional initiative. 200 million ang galing sa House. Yung 200 million ang galing sa Committee on Finance, ano? Initiated by the Subcommittee. Kasi ako naman yung nag-defend ng budget ninyo last year for this year. So ang tanong ko, pwede bang bigyan nyo kami ng detalye doon sa pooled amounts? Ilan ba yung FLR dyan? Of course, 400 million. I suppose the almost 200 million, 106 and 81, nanggaling to, ginawang FLR yung congressional initiative without even looking at what kind of congressional initiative ang na-insert o na-realign sa budget ng DDB at saka ng PDEA. Parang indiscriminately, ito, basta congressional initiative ito, tanggalin natin ito. So ano yung tinamaan na programa nyo?
Sir, we have a letter, sir, from our chairman. At least, sir, requesting sana kami, sir, yung 250 million for community-based programs. And then yung ating initiative, sir, with LTO, yung sa drunk and driving law, Mr. Chair, kasi long overdue na yun eh. Dapat
So tinamaan yung saliva test nyo?
Yes, sir, yung saliva test,
Doon
sir.
sa pinol out na 81.9 million from DDB, magkano yung para doon sa saliva test?
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, yung total amount is kasi from for NRL, LTO, and DDB, sir. 46 sa DDB, 46 sa LTO, almost 38, sir, yung sa NRL.
So kaya hindi na-implement. Dapat
Wala,
yan
sir.
implemented this year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kung hindi inalis ng sa bayanihan. And you are now requesting na sa 2021, maibalik natin. Okay, we'll take note of that. Ano? How much yung PADS in 2019? Because I suppose, kasi 2018 yung issuance, first time na nabudgetan ito, 2019. Magkano?
I
1
don't have.
billion plus.
Yes, sir.
1.5 ba?
1.5. More or less, sir. More or less.
2020, magkano?
2020, supposedly 600 plus, Mr. Chair.
Hindi, 1 plus din yata. Yung multi-agency na, lahat-lahat na. Yung nakatag.
Okay. I don't have the data with me, sir.
Oh,
Yung-
1 billion plus din. So again, I'll go back to my previous question. Kung ito yung top priority, bakit ganun kaliit yung binibigay para sa PADS? Can you argue that next time when you submit yung budget nyo sa budget call? Can you not argue that with the DBM? Na parang, okay, you can mention the observation of the subcommittee and the senators na parang hindi nakasynchronize yung mga PAPs ano do sa overall strategy ng laban sa illegal drugs, because that's Philippine Anti-Illegal Drugs Strategy, di ba? PADS. Ba't pa tayo nag-issue ng EO 66? Oh, ang tatanungin ko sana, tinamad na ba si Presidente sa fight against illegal drugs?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair, kasi in his every pronouncement, kasama pa rin ang drugs eh.
Yeah, but
So-
ang pronouncement iba kesa do sa pagsuporta actually, yung practical support, no? Kasi madali magsabi na galit ako sa drugs, pero kung hindi mo binabudgetan, paano matatalo yung drugs? Correct? So I just hope
That's
I
noted.
just hope you use that argument, ano? Of course, next time na ito, but you know, even for this year, sana man lang kung mag-augment yung Congress, wag na kamong galawin. No? COVID or no COVID, tuloy pa rin yung laban sa illegal drugs, di ba? So, yun. And yung mga requirements for submission, Wilkins, maawa ka sa akin dahil tatanungin sa akin sa floor. You come up with the accurate figures, especially yung distraction and magkano, ilan na lang talaga yung naiiwanan. And of course, between now and November, because we will suspend our session come October 17, I think, ano? And then we'll resume almost a month after that. Doon, mag-start kami ng plenary. So you have enough time to destroy some more. Invoking the memorandum circular or memorandum issued by the court administrator to the lower courts. Kasi they cannot anymore invoke yung mga requirements pa na, di ba ang usapan noon, natatandaan ko noon when we had a hearing last time, representative sample lamang pwede nang i-preserve. And the bulk of the drugs confiscated, sirain na kagad in compliance with the Dangerous Drugs Act na within 48 ba yan? 48 hours di ba? Which is, yeah, impossible na mamagawa because of the tedious requirements ng lower court na may inspection, hindi implementable yung provision na yon. But then it has been cured by the memorandum issued by the court administrator. So yun na lang yung i-pursue ninyo. So I hope kaya bang isiro ito? Naiwan na lang gramo-gramo by November. So pagbalik namin November, ang pagtanong ni maski sino magtanong, wala na kami inventaryo, yung nahuli lang kahapon yung nasa inventory namin. Okay? Sige. So with that, we will suspend and you just make your submissions, especially yung mga priority programs yun na maapektuhan in 2021. Of course, we may not be able to get everything that you will ask for. But at least, yung mga priorities ninyo, isubmit nyo lang sa amin, gawin ng submission. So, we can consider that when we submit our committee report at saka sa amendment sa floor. So, thank you for your presence and keep safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honorable members. Good morning po.